Hey guys, Psycho Chef here. Welcome to this week's Guild Wars 2 Hype. Today I'm going to be talking about dungeons, mostly just a brief overview. We'll get into specifics later if I have time. So, in Guild Wars 2, there's going to be 8 dungeons available at release. I can only find 7 of them. I've not found the 8th. I don't know if I'm just not looking hard enough or if I'm just being lazy. But the 7 that I was able to find are the Ascalon Catacombs, Lord Beetlestone's Estate, Sorrow's Embrace, Caudicus's Mansion. I know I totally fudged that name up. I apologize. An Asura Laboratory and a Maguma. It's got 2 U's, so I don't know. Maguma themed Sylvari dungeon and an Orion, because it's got 2 R's, dungeon where Zaitan resides. That's just all the stuff I could get from the wiki, and I looked at Guild Wars 2 and a couple other places, and I could not find anything about the 8th dungeon, so we'll probably get more information on that later. But for now, those are the 7 that have been released or that I have found. One of the cool things about the Guild Wars 2 dungeons is that there's only going to be these 8 on release. Now, I don't know about you guys, but in all the other MMOs that I've seen, there's usually a lot more than 8, especially at release. But here's where this is where it comes in handy for Guild Wars 2. These 8 dungeons have 2 modes. There is the initial, when you first go into the dungeon, is called story mode, and it's obviously just a story. You are guided by, I had to look at my notes here, by a member of Destiny's Edge, and they pretty much just take you through the dungeon in the story mode, and you do the dungeon. It's pretty much just a linear thing. You go from point A to point B, and then you're done. And then you've got the other mode, which is the explorable mode, which is tuned for a little bit higher. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say normal versus heroic, like in WoW you had your normals and your heroics. Not quite the same, but similar. Story mode, let's say Ascalon Catacombs, I think is a level 30 dungeon, I think. Don't quote me on that, but let's just say it's a level 30 dungeon. Story mode, you go in, you play through it at level 30, and you finish it. Then once you finish it, you've unlocked the explorable mode. In the explorable mode, you want to be about level 35. If I remember correctly, it's about the area that you want to be in. It's about five or so levels higher than the actual dungeon. Now, as far as higher level dungeons like 50s and 60s and 70s and all that kind of stuff, I'm not 100% sure if that's how it's going to work, where you go in story mode at level 70, and level 75 is going to be explorable. The explorable might be level 80. I don't know yet. I haven't seen anything on it. But I'm assuming that that's how it's going to work, approximately. But I know for sure that if you're at a level 30 dungeon, and you go through it in story mode at level 30, it's going to be level 35 when you go through it in explorable mode. Now, every dungeon has 3 routes that you can take, which is why there's only 8 of them, because that means that there's a lot more than 8 actual, it's the same dungeon, but you can take a different route, and it's completely different. It's a different storyline, it's a different set of bosses, it's different loot drops, everything is just different, but yet it's the same dungeon. So that kind of ties into the lore of the dungeons and the history behind some of the dungeons that you're doing, and you just go through a different storyline. So instead of going through the dungeon 100 times over and over and over and over again, you go through it once, you complete it, and then you go through it the second time, and it's completely different. And then you go through it a third time, and you take a different route. Again, it's completely different. So each of these dungeons has 3 different ways that you can go, and then depending on what actions you choose and how you interact with the environment in the dungeon, it allows... so your actions affect hidden and random events. I'm not 100% sure what that means, but I would assume that if you do action A, when you come to a crossroads, you do action A, then something different happens than if you were to choose action B. That's just my assumption. I could be way off base, but that seems to be a logical conclusion. Also, in the dungeons, there will be, just like in the WoW heroics, and I think even some of the Cataclysm regulars, there will be waypoints. Now, waypoints are different in Guild Wars than in WoW. WoW is just a portal where you die, you go into the dungeon, and you hit the portal and you go. But just like in WoW, these portals aren't going to unlock until you get to a certain point, like a checkpoint, so to speak, or you defeat a certain boss. Then the waypoint opens up, and you can respawn there instead of having to walk all the way back from the beginning of the dungeon, which I think is kind of neat. It doesn't, the game still kind of kicks you around and says, "Hey, don't die," but it doesn't brutally punish you if you do accidentally die. Because, be honest, shit happens. What can you do? So I think that's another interesting thing. One of the other things that's different about Guild Wars 2 dungeons is that when you finish the dungeon, you get tokens. And if you're in story mode, you get we'll just say a story token, and in explorable mode, you get the explorable token. At any rate, they're going to be different kind of dungeon tokens, similar to I guess best thing you can compare them to is the I almost said judgment, the justice points and the valor points in WoW. You use your justice points to buy, good, you can still buy epic items with your justice points, but they're not going to be as good as the valor point epics, and so on and so forth. So likewise, in story mode, since it's the lower level rank of the dungeon, in story mode, you do the dungeon in story mode, you get your coins at the end, and you can trade these coins in for for weapons from the dungeon set, which I'll go into in a minute. And then in explorable mode, you can get armor from the dungeon set. So story mode, you get weapons, and explore mode, you get armors. So obviously, it kind of goes hand in hand. There are going to be a few less, I would assume, a little bit less on the weapons side than there are on the armor side. Like, for example, you're going to go through the dungeon in story mode, and you're going to get a weapon, which is going to help you out a little bit. And then you keep going over and over and over through the different courses of the dungeon in explorable mode, and you're going to get different armor pieces. Now, I haven't read a whole lot into this, but I'm going to attempt to relate it to the tier system in WoW. In the tier pieces in WoW is, as of right now, it wasn't always this way, but right now it's just 5 pieces. It's a head, shoulders, legs, chest, and something else. I lost one. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. No. Head, shoulders, chest, legs. I know I'm missing something. My brain is not cooperating with me tonight. But at any rate, it's 5 pieces of gear. And you get a bonus if you get a 2-piece and if you have 4 pieces of this set. I would assume that it might be... Now, there might be similarities to that. There might not be. But all the tier pieces in WoW had a look. Whether it was tier 0 or tier 12. It has a look for every class. And the dungeon sets are similar, I would assume. Don't quote me on that, but this is just theory crafting here. So let's say, for example, you're going to go into the Ascalon Catacombs. The Ascalon Catacombs is from the Char's history, the Char lore. So when you go in there, I would imagine that any pieces of the dungeon set that come from there are going to look like they were manufactured by Char, as opposed to something like, let's say, the Asura Laboratory, which didn't have a proper name. It was just called an Asura Laboratory. Say you go in and you complete your dungeon there. That gear is going to look more like Asura made it. It's going to be more fluid, more technological looking, more streamlined. And then the Char is going to be just, brutal and not gonna say bulky, but just warrior-esque and so on and so forth. Whereas you go through an Asura not Asura, a Sylvari-esque dungeon. Maybe it has earthy tones to it, or I'm not gonna say looks like a plant, although that would be kind of cool. But which it very well might make you look like a plant. I wouldn't be too ecstatic to try it, but hey, I wouldn't mind if it was in there. So I would assume that that's what these dungeon sets are going to be like. So, finish it in story mode, you get your tokens, you trade it in for weapons. Finish it in explorable mode, you get your tokens, and you trade those in for armor. I don't know where. I didn't read into that. If it said it, I didn't find it. So, sorry. And actually, that looks like it's all that I wrote down here. Waypoints, one of the waypoints, dungeon tokens. Yep, that's it. So that looks like it's going to be it for this episode, guys. Again, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next week. I'm could only find information on the Azkaban Catacombs, Sorrow's Embrace, Maguuma, and Orion. Orion. I'm sorry if I'm totally destroying these names. Those are the only ones that have any other information on them than just what it is that I could find. So might start going into more in-depth stuff on that. But again, still only got 15 minutes to be able to do these things, and in-depth might take a little more than 15 minutes. So, but anyway, I hope that this video has been informative to you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, I'm Psycho Chef, and I'll catch you guys later.